The day we moved into our new $1 million villa was a whirlwind of excitement and anticipation. Mark and I had saved for years to afford our dream home, and it was finally a reality. The villa was a stunning architectural masterpiece, with large windows that framed breathtaking views of the tranquil lake and lush greenery that surrounded us. As we stood in the grand entrance, admiring the high ceilings and elegant decor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was our fresh start, a place where we could build our life together and create lasting memories. But little did I know that our dream would soon take an unexpected turn. Just a few weeks after we settled in, Mark dropped the bombshell that his mother, Eleanor, would be moving in with us. I was caught off guard by this sudden announcement, and a wave of apprehension washed over me. Eleanor was not a woman to be trifled with. She'd always been a strong-willed, opinionated woman, and her relationship with Mark had always been unusually close. While I respected their bond, the idea of living under the same roof with her made me uneasy. Mark, however, assured me that it would only be temporary. Eleanor was going through a tough time, he said, and she needed a place to stay until she got back on her feet. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping that her stay would indeed be brief. Eleanor's arrival was like a storm brewing on the horizon, threatening to disrupt the tranquil life Mark and I had envisioned in our new villa. I had spent weeks meticulously planning the interior decor and layout, striving to create a space that reflected our tastes and aspirations as a couple. But as Eleanor settled into her new room, it was clear that her presence would overshadow our dreams. She came with a sense of entitlement that was hard to ignore. From the moment she walked through the front door, it was as if she considered our villa her own. I tried to be hospitable, showing her around the house and explaining our vision for each room, but her dismissive attitude was disheartening. Eleanor wasted no time in making her mark on our home. She rearranged the furniture in the living room to her liking, changed the settings on the kitchen appliances, and even moved some of my personal items without asking. Her disregard for our boundaries was unsettling, and I felt like a guest in my own house. The most challenging part was her imposition of rules. At first, they seemed innocuous, like guidelines to ensure cleanliness and order. However, as the days went by, the list of rules grew longer and more absurd. She had rules for everything, from how we should fold our towels to the proper way to arrange the cutlery in the kitchen. It was as if Eleanor was trying to mold our lives into her own vision of perfection, and it left me feeling stifled and frustrated. I tried discussing my concerns with Mark, but he seemed torn between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to our marriage. As the days turned into weeks, Eleanor's list of rules continued to expand like a tangled web, weaving its way into the fabric of our daily lives. Every morning seemed to bring a new addition to her ever-growing code of conduct, each one more arbitrary than the last. The rules covered every aspect of our existence within the villa. She dictated when the curtains should be drawn and the precise angle at which they should hang. The way we made our bed had to meet her exacting standards, and she insisted on weekly inspections to ensure compliance. Mealtimes became a chore, as we had to adhere to a strict schedule that Eleanor had devised. She monitored portion sizes and scrutinized our eating habits, often criticizing our choices or insisting we follow her diet plan. It was as if we were living in a never-ending reality show where Eleanor played the role of the strict judge. Our social life suffered as well. Friends and family members who came to visit were subjected to Eleanor's rules, and some of them began to avoid our home altogether to escape the constant scrutiny. I felt isolated and embarrassed by her behavior, but Mark still seemed unwilling to confront his mother. The breaking point came one evening when I accidentally left a small stack of papers on the coffee table. Eleanor's reaction was explosive. She berated me for what seemed like hours, accusing me of disregarding her rules and creating chaos in her perfect home. I couldn't take it anymore. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how intolerable our living situation had become. I stormed out of the room, feeling humiliated and defeated. Mark followed me, his face etched with a mix of frustration and helplessness. After the heated confrontation over the stack of papers, our home felt like a battlefield where my husband, Mark, and I tiptoed around each other, trying to avoid setting off another explosion with Eleanor. The tension in the house was palpable, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was living in a constant state of unease. It became increasingly evident that Eleanor's presence was driving a wedge between Mark and me. He was caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to our marriage. Every conversation seemed to revolve around Eleanor and her rules, leaving little room for us to discuss our own dreams and aspirations. I tried to communicate my feelings to Mark, emphasizing how her presence and the oppressive rules were affecting our relationship. But every time I broached the subject, it led to arguments and defensiveness. It was clear that Mark struggled to see the toll Eleanor's behavior was taking on our marriage. As days turned into weeks, the clashes between Eleanor and me intensified. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home, constantly at odds with her over her arbitrary rules and stringent demands. I knew something had to change, but I couldn't fathom how to bring about that change without further straining my relationship with Mark. Our once happy marriage was hanging by a thread, and I was desperate to find a solution before it unraveled completely. Chapter 4 was a period of emotional turmoil as I grappled with the ever-increasing divide between Mark and me, wondering if our love was strong enough to weather this storm or if our dream villa would become nothing more than a gilded cage. The pressure in our home continued to build, and Chapter 5 marked a pivotal moment in our tumultuous journey. One evening, after another exhausting argument with Eleanor about her rules, I retreated to our bedroom, seeking solace and a moment of respite. Mark followed me, and we sat in strained silence. As we sat on our bed, Mark suddenly dropped a bombshell that left me stunned and heartbroken. He looked at me with a conflicted expression and said, "Maybe it would be best if you moved out." I couldn't believe my ears. It was as if the floor had fallen out from under me. Mark explained that he was seriously considering evicting me from our own house to keep the peace with his mother. He believed that it was the only way to maintain some semblance of harmony in our home. I was devastated. The man I had married, the man I had built a life with, was now suggesting that I leave our dream villa. Tears welled up in my eyes as I tried to comprehend the gravity of his words. I asked him how he could even entertain such a thought, and he replied with a heavy sigh, "I just don't know what else to do. I can't keep living like this, and I can't bear to see my mother upset." It felt like a betrayal. I had expected Mark to stand by my side, to defend our marriage and our home. Instead, it seemed like he was choosing his mother over me. It was a heartbreaking moment that left me questioning the strength of our relationship. Chapter 6 was a period of turmoil, marked by a deep sense of despair and uncertainty. After Mark's shocking suggestion that I should move out of our own home to accommodate his mother's demands, I felt like I had hit rock bottom. But I wasn't ready to give up on our marriage or our dream villa just yet. Determined to find a way to salvage our relationship, I suggested that we seek the help of a professional mediator. I believed that a neutral third party could provide the guidance and perspective we needed to navigate the complex dynamics that had taken hold of our household. Mark, initially resistant to the idea, eventually agreed, perhaps realizing the severity of the situation and the toll it was taking on both of us. We found a skilled mediator who specialized in family conflict resolution and began the challenging process of mediation. In those sessions, we were forced to confront the deep-seated issues that had driven a wedge between us. The mediator created a safe space for us to communicate openly and honestly about our feelings and frustrations. It was difficult, emotional, and at times painful, but it was also cathartic. Through the mediation process, I was able to express how overwhelmed and isolated I felt in our home due to Eleanor's rules and Mark's reluctance to confront her behavior. Mark, in turn, shared his deep-seated fear of disappointing his mother and losing the bond they had always shared. Slowly, the mediator helped us see the destructive pattern that had emerged in our relationship. Mark realized that his mother's rules were causing more harm than good, and that our marriage was on the brink of collapse. I, on the other hand, acknowledged that my frustration and anger had also contributed to the growing rift between us. With the help of the mediator, Mark and I began to make progress in rebuilding our strained relationship. The turning point came when we finally mustered the courage to confront Eleanor together about her rules and the impact they were having on our marriage. It was a tense evening when we sat down with her in the living room, flanked by the mediator. Eleanor was visibly upset and defensive, but we remained resolute in our determination to make her understand how her behavior was affecting our family. We took turns expressing our feelings, emphasizing that we loved her but needed our own space and autonomy within our home. We also highlighted how her rules had driven a wedge between Mark and me, pushing our marriage to the brink of collapse. The mediator guided the conversation, ensuring that it remained productive and respectful. Eleanor, at first, resisted the idea of relinquishing control. She argued that her rules were well-intentioned and meant to maintain order and harmony. However, as we continued to share our experiences and emotions, she began to soften. It was clear that she was starting to understand the toll her behavior had taken on our family. In a surprising moment of vulnerability, Eleanor confessed that she had been lonely and had imposed these rules in an attempt to regain a sense of purpose and connection within our family. Her revelation was a breakthrough, as it allowed us to address the root of the problem rather than just the rules themselves. We agreed to work together to establish new boundaries that would respect our individual needs while maintaining a sense of harmony within the household. Eleanor gradually let go of her rigid control, and we began to dismantle the oppressive rules one by one. As we worked toward finding a new balance within our home, Eleanor began to let go of her strict rules, and for a while, it seemed like our family was on a path to healing. However, things took an unexpected turn in Chapter 8 that would test our family's resolve in ways we could never have predicted. Eleanor, unable to fully accept the changes in our household, decided to take matters into her own hands. She became increasingly resentful of the compromises we had made, and her stubbornness prevailed. In a fit of frustration, she declared that if her rule were no longer valued, she would leave our home. We were taken aback by her decision, but chose not to dissuade her. We believed that giving her some space and time to reflect might be for the best. Little did we know that Eleanor's decision was not just a threat, but a resolute action. Within a matter of days, Eleanor packed her bags and left our villa. She moved into a nearby hotel, expecting us to come running, begging her to return. However, this time, we didn't. We had reached a point where we couldn't bear the constant tension and control any longer, and we were willing to take the risk of living without her in our lives. In her absence, our home underwent a transformation. We removed all of her rules, returning our villa to the haven of peace and tranquility we had originally envisioned. The absence of her strict control allowed us to rediscover the joy of being a family and the intimacy of our marriage. We learned to appreciate the freedom and autonomy we had regained and relished the opportunity to create our own rules and routines. Our friends and family began to visit us again, and our home became a place of laughter and love, unburdened by the oppressive atmosphere that had plagued it for so long. As the weeks passed without Eleanor's presence in our home, our lives continued to evolve in surprising ways. Chapter 9 marked a fresh start for our family, one that none of us could have anticipated. Eleanor, believing that we would beg her to return, held on to her stance of independence, refusing to reach out to us. However, instead of returning to her former life of solitude and control, she found herself in a difficult situation. The hotel she had checked into was expensive, and her savings were dwindling rapidly. She had no other family to turn to, as her relationships with them had also become strained over the years. In the absence of our support, Eleanor faced the harsh reality of her situation. She couldn't maintain her lifestyle in the hotel for long, and her stubbornness prevented her from reaching out to us. Eventually, her financial resources ran out, and she had to leave the hotel. Eleanor's predicament was a stark contrast to the newfound happiness in our home. Mark and I had rekindled the love and intimacy in our marriage, and our villa had become a true sanctuary of peace and happiness. Without Eleanor's oppressive rules, we were free to create our own rules and routines that suited our family. Despite everything that had happened, we still cared about Eleanor's well-being, and we were genuinely concerned for her. Mark reached out to her, offering to help find a more suitable living arrangement, but she was too proud to accept his help. Eleanor's stubbornness had cost her dearly. As we navigated the complexities of our family dynamics, we learned important lessons about the value of compromise, the importance of setting healthy boundaries, and the strength of our love. Our dream villa, once tainted by conflict, had become a symbol of our resilience and newfound unity. reminding us that sometimes, in the face of adversity, the most unexpected paths can lead to a brighter future.